My name is Hanna Densik Petersson. I'm the director of Oslo Architecture Triennale, and welcome to this webinar in conversation with 45 Degrees. The webinar is part of the OAT 20 years jubileum, and that we kicked off just a couple of hours ago. The jubileum will last for a week with program all day long, every day. So you can follow the rest of the program on our Jubilee platform, 2020.oslotriennale.no. I'm going to just shortly introduce why we're having this conversation with 45 Degrees and two other creatives that have been selected through an open call that we're doing as members of something called Future Architecture Platform. It's a pan-European program with 25 organizations working together to promote young and creative voices. And each year we do an open call through which each institution chooses a number of creatives to work with and to promote within their own program. So this year, 45 Degrees is one of our creatives, European creatives, and that we're very happy to have on our team. I'm gonna not say so much more because I'm not the main actor of this show. It's 45 Degrees and Alexandra Cruz, who is program manager here at AHO. So yeah, welcome Alexandra and welcome 45 Degrees.
Hello Anna, thank you. Now I can hear you. Can you hear me, 45?
We hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Hi. Okay, hello. Yes, as Anna was saying, this is the first conversation in this series of conversation with creatives from the FAP program that we invited this year to participate and contribute to the 20th anniversary of OAT. So 2020 marks the 20th anniversary of the Oslo Architecture Triennale, and this celebration is also the central focus of the program that we are developing this year, as it gives us the opportunity to look back to our history and use this not only to revisit some key moments in the history of OAT, but also to understand how we have developed, where we are today, and what are the important challenges and choices that we face ahead. But more importantly, this jubilee gives us also the opportunity to use the Triennale as a pretext to reflect upon and discuss the recent developments that have affected the context where we are inserted, which is the city of Oslo, and to invite different voices to take part in these discussions and conversations. And this was the basis of the invitation that we made to the FAB creatives in 2020 to look at the Triennale archive with their own fresh eyes and select a theme, a topic, or a project as the starting point to elaborate a response. We invited the Berlin-based architectural duo 45 Degrees to contribute to the 2020th program, as we thought that their scope of interests in informal urbanism practices was very relevant to include in this reflection about Oslo. And now I would like to introduce you and to invite Alkistis, Thomidou and Gianmaria Socci to join us now in this conversation. So hello, I suggest that you start by introducing yourselves and then lead us through the project Oslo Actions that you developed for the Jubileum program. Okay, so yeah, I pass it to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Alexandra. Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the past months working together have been very inspiring. And so we're happy to present the present results of our research. Maybe it's important to give a little bit of a background of like who we are, why we started to work together. As Alexandra said, we've always been, maybe we start to share our screen. Yeah, we always been very interested in informal practices of urbanism. We actually started, we met when we were studying together in ETH, studying urbanism in the developing territories, where we started to research how favela relocations in Sao Paulo were developed and sort of hacked by the residents themselves. So after this initial, so after these initial studies, which were actually in 2012, we've been working together for many years, mostly developing competition proposals. So we try to apply this concept of citizen involvement in two briefs that were actually instead developed within this typical framework of the top-down big planning. And so we were very interested to understand how we could introduce different scales in this idea of urban planning. That's how we developed a series of competition proposals, mostly in Europe. What you're seeing now are two competitions in Greece. And then we come to the call of Future Architecture Platform, where we decided to take a different approach. So after many years of struggling with this system of design-based competition, we wanted to take the opportunity offered by Future Architecture Platform to look at a different approach and really start to learn from the ground and researching what were the actual bottom-up initiatives in the context of Europe. So that's how we wrote our proposal for the platform, which was called 35 Meridians of Radical Rituals. And the initial idea was to have an itinerant survey along the 45th parallel that you see depicted here, hence also the sort of specific name of our collective at the moment. We were very interested in this line because we thought it identified a metaphorical divide that we saw very present in Europe. Just thinking of all the neo-nationalist movements which are arising everywhere. And we thought that it was interesting because although it was, geographically sort of splitting Europe in half, it was also crossing these places that are kind of at the periphery of the usual narration of urban space making. So we were very much interested in this idea of the interstices, and in a discourse that went beyond the usual professional practice. That's how we also took on the challenge of Oslo Architecture Triennale, and we were very actually humbled to apply these ideas to the context of Oslo. We started to, that's also when actually the pandemic started. It was February, March, and obviously we needed to take a different approach. The itinerant survey was not an option anymore. So we started to collect instances of examples where the citizens were actually taking over to cover the shortcomings of planning and urban infrastructure in terms of mostly of mutual practices of mutual care. And that's a little bit the starting point of how we started to work in Oslo.
Are we still sharing this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With the invitation of the Oslo Triennale to look into their archive, basically, and we decided in a way to. We went through the archive and we looked into all these curatorial positions and quite heavy and hot topics that the Oslo Triennale was addressing the past years, like the architecture of degrowth, after belonging, and all these topics. And we wanted somehow to see how these topics, and if they are in a way reflected on the ground in the city of Oslo. Of course, both of us, we were kind of strangers to the context of Oslo. So we started with the help, of course, and the proposition of the Oslo Triennale team. We started a series of calls and email avalanche, and through this snowball effect, we got to, in a way, understand a little bit the landscape of the city regarding initiatives and hands-on initiatives and citizen-driven bottom-up practices. And here you see we had a lot of video calls, and throughout these discussions, actually we started to think the topic of the Oslo Triennale Jubilee conversations about the city, and we thought maybe it would be helpful to rephrase this question in a way and say, how can we, what is the conversation with the city and not only about the city, and who do we mean by saying city? We started by making, first of all, a more geographical locating, for us also to understand a little bit the landscape of the city, to locate them on a map. And at the same time, created kind of a back, we'll show you a little bit the back of the backstage of our project. We created this kind of database where we started cataloging all the initiatives and seeing, like taking a cross section through all the different levels, from very established hands-on design practices that work on the ground in space making projects, but also individuals that we got as proposals from other initiatives. And then all this research, we, and also throughout this idea of the restrictions of traveling and the pandemic, we had to figure out how to present and make all this research accessible. So we came up with this idea to create a digital atlas, as we call it, which is basically a tool to navigate the city and the initiatives, which is manifested in this website, Oslo Actions, that we launched today, and we're very happy to present it to you. Huge thanks to everybody who contributed to this website. It's like a navigating tool. You can scroll up and down, right and left, and along this black and white image, you will see these blue titles, names that you can hover over. There is a little bubble on with very short description, and then when you click on them, you're redirected to the actual page, which is in a way split in two. There is a narration, and it's basically a transcription of the interviews and the discussions we had with many of these actors, first virtually, and then when we had a study trip, I forgot to say, where we managed to go to Oslo and visit many of them in their locations and in their places where they act and work. So on the right side, there is all this documentation of the physical manifestation of these places and actions, just to give a little bit more of the atmosphere and the environment that all these places are, these activities are taking place.
Yeah, and then also maybe just to a couple of notes on how we wrote the stories. We were very much interested in delivering the background of how these initiatives came to be. So for us, more than only a description of what they are, it was interesting to understand how, what kind of strategies, what kind of tactics the initiators had to go through, and how they compare with what we know as urban planning in the professional field. So that's basically how we compose the text in terms of this story. And then also every initiative is also connected to a location on Google Maps, which could be then navigated and could compose possible itineraries, and of course to their own social media outputs. Also important to know that we try to establish relations between different practices in terms of topics or maybe past collaborations, so that you could jump from one to another if you follow a special thread of interest. And then one last thing, one other way to navigate the site is to enter the location page, where all the initiatives are listed by the name. And I think it was interesting for us also in the way we kind of, I wouldn't say we really selected them, because we had a very short time span to develop the whole project. So we tried to give space to everybody, but it was interesting for us to feature as much diverse practices as possible, both in terms of content, so what they deal with, and we go from education to arts, youth, gardening, and so on. But also diversity in terms of level of operation. So as Alkistis mentioned before, we have some initiatives that are like truly grassroots, informal, almost individual initiatives, and other that are on the other hand launched and supported by the authorities. So yeah, just as a conclusion, maybe the website in its present form is not meant to be by any term a comprehensive view of the city. We are very aware of our limitations as a foreigner, but this is just our very personal interpretation, and it has to be seen as a sort of a snapshot in this moment of time and through our very personal perspective. We hope that this could just kickstart a conversation about how citizen initiatives could be included better in the narrative of space making. And we hope that the actual archive, the back of the house of the project, could be taken over by someone else and expanded and made available to both the citizens and also the practitioners. That's a little bit our hope for the future. I think we've maybe covered the main points, but it would be nice now to also take on questions and have a conversation about these first ideas.
Okay. Thank you very much for this presentation, especially for sharing all the, let's say, the process behind this result, this output that you are showing now, because that was really, let's say, a thorough research that you made in this very short period of time, and this involvement and development of meetings and identification of the different initiatives and the different actors working with this type of initiatives and practices was something that you took quite thorough, and that was very impressive. I would start, now we start this part of the presentation, we start in the conversation, and I will have some questions that I will ask you, but we also open for questions for the people everybody that is listening to this presentation at home. So we really want to include these people in the conversation. So please, everybody that sits at home, if you have any question or any comment, please send it through the chat, and then we will look through it and answer it as the conversation evolves. So first thing, I would like to ask you, what would you say are the most important things that the profession, let's say architects and urbanists, can learn from these informal initiatives and bottom-up practices?
You want to answer, or I can?
You can start.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to learn. For us, it was extremely inspiring. I think, although we've been a little bit, as we try to say in the introduction, we've always been working in this realm of informal urbanism, whatever that means, but always from a mostly design perspective. So how could we adapt our design strategies in terms of scale, in terms of material, to open up for the participation of the final users. But I think what the study of these initiatives in Oslo proved us is that most of the work actually has to go into activism on the ground, into political lobbying, into lobbying with the media, and really presence. So there's definitely a durational aspect in all of these projects that we have discovered. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work.
And something that all these initiatives in a way highlight is that there is so many gaps in the administrative processes and the official way of city making that that actually there is a lot of niches but you have to find them, and it takes a lot of, as Gianmaria said, a lot of time and a lot of motivation to find these niches. And as you said, it's very inspiring as a planner or designer that we always follow the rules, and somehow this initiative showed us that you can follow the rules, but there are always little letters, a little text that you can always tackle and find more adaptable or more open and more porous solutions for many things. Yeah. that we never learn in our education also as designers and architects. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's interesting because one can see that, as you mentioned, some of these initiatives, they happen in a space in between what is regulated and what is not regulated. Somehow in between the fringes in the system. And we know that some cities are more permeable and spontaneous to these kind of actions than others. From your experience of working with different contexts and different cities, how do you see that in Oslo? What was your impression about this?
It was I think it was very impressive and refreshing also to see the variety and the diversity of practices, like dealing with the idea of the commons really on the ground, like for example, the water, the fjord, the rivers of Oslo, they're public space and they're part of the commons. And it was a huge, it was a big surprise for us that there's so many people working with it. On the other hand, there's a lot of people working with the vulnerable groups, using artistic practice or hands-on empowerment of youth. And it was very, very impressive, the variety of all these practices that have also a manifestation on the ground, like a physical manifestation, but also the heritage, somehow the legacy also when projects started and how they empowered other people, and then this became more like a network or a system that grows. It was very amazing.
Yeah, we were discussing about how somehow, although of course like Oslo, but I guess like many other Western cities, appears on the surface like having this like very strict, very opaque administrative machine. On the other hand, maybe because of the size, maybe it's not, like a megalopolis, there seems to be entryways to connect and to lobby with politicians through the media as well, which we found is definitely lacking in the south of Europe where we come from, for instance, where the discourse on the media is always about abstract topics and never about real politics. It's very rare to find a discussion about the future of a specific urban space, for instance. But this seems to be a great potential, we think, in Oslo. And of course, like I think the example of the harbor is a very good one to see how single initiatives, thinking of the floating saunas and the work of Hans Jorgen and so on, how they really kind of trigger the process that then, of course, necessitates the effort of large parts of the population, but somehow could be recognized. Yeah. So that was very inspiring.
And also the scale of specific things, like, of course, in Berlin, where we live and work, there is a big history and a kind of mentality and culture on participation and being active as a citizen, but it often stays in this level of on the ground, like people acting on their own initiative. There is a lot of discussions also on the bigger scale, but for example, the example of Losseter, this huge urban agriculture project, which started as an public art and public space project, but actually it brought public administration and artists and farmers and so many different actors together, and it even managed to. The biggest success in our view is that there is an employed farmer, a city farmer, which is a position in the local administration that I don't think other cities have. So it's the scale of the specific project was very, very impressive.
We have a question now that came up in the chat, and I will read it. It's by, we can see, it's from, Kai. The question is from you. If you are there, we can try to unmute you so that you can ask it yourself. Okay, hi.
Hi, Kai.
Hi. Oh, hey, no, it's just about nice work. Cool. Great. I can't see my own question. I wrote it in the chat. Oh yeah. Can you say something about the map /website/drawing? Is it a tool? Is it a representation? Is it geometry? How do we use it, et cetera, et cetera? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Kai. Basically, it was a decision that we took first to allow other people to experience and navigate the city, because there is no physical event in Oslo in this Jubilee. And on the other hand, was a way to bring all these initiatives together on the same page, in a way, like visualizing, giving some physical references like the fjord, the opera house, landmarks that the viewer can refer to. But on the other hand, it becomes more like a easy tool of navigating the city, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, we were obviously inspired by the maps of the pre-Renaissance maps. This idea that maybe geography is not an objective reality, but it's more a psychogeographic reality. So this is just our experience of Oslo, which is totally partial, and it's totally biased by our own trip to Oslo and the people we connected to. But it was a way to represent in graphics our spatial experiences of exploring the city. So it also tries to establish somehow some relations of proximity between practices and more perceived distances. Maybe what is important to say is also that during the development of this, we went back and forth between different ideas. We had ambition for the project to be open, to be interactive, so that users could also upload their own stories and expand the map. But this, of course, was not possible within the scope of this first attempt. So this is our snapshot in this moment of time, but we hope it could become a dynamic tool. Yeah.
We were actually hoping to, in a way, create a Fra Mauro map where geographic reference and text and image, they all belong to the same field. Yeah, exactly.
And I would like to come back a little bit to the history, let's say the starting point of this whole operation. When we started talking, and that you kind of, you told us your interest would be to look through the OAT archive and search for this, for the presence of these bottom-up initiatives throughout OAT history, these 20 years, and understand what has happened, kind of initiatives, concerns that they had. I mean, how has been the approach, and it's interesting. And then let's say to continue that from the perspective of today, and I would like to ask you through this research that you did, because we have had different initiatives in the program, but we never had somehow a framework that would establish this line, this narrative, that we would see them in connection to each other. So this work that you are doing now with this atlas is somehow that sort of framework, that narrative, it highlights that. But through this, let's say, this revisitation of the archive that you did, are there any common trends that you would say, that you would like to highlight from the examples you found in the archive and the actions that you identified today?
I mean, maybe not going into the specific of particular entries for the Triennale, but more in general, I think we were interested in the curatorial statements and in the topics that were exposed through the exhibition. And we found, I don't know how to express it, but maybe we found that maybe there's the conversation is about the same things between between the what happens within the Triennale, which is of course this which is aimed at mostly at a professional circle, and what happens in the city. The topics are similar. They have a lot of overlaps, but the narrative is often very different, because once we went down to the ground of the actual initiatives, we discovered that struggle that has a lot to do with the administration, politics, legal stuff that maybe could be, I think, of great values also for professionals. It's a little bit the difference between being an activist and being a theorist, I guess. I think both perspectives are equally important. But I think our attempt with this project was to try to make them communicate. And this is a very, how to say, this is just, very ambitious, and this is just a micro step towards that direction. But that's maybe, that was the most important aspect for us, to try to translate the topics that were very well framed theoretically in the Triennale into, the mess of everyday life.
But not in order to romanticize it, but really to give it a stage for representation, because the discourse and the Triennale, as Gianmaria said, it has a limited, not limited, but at some point it reaches a specific spectrum of professionals, and there's a lot of people on the ground that don't feel represented in this discourse, but they actually, with their actions, are very much contributing to this discourse.
And that leads me a bit to the next question. I mean, in the different actions that you selected, you did this research and then you selected to highlight a number of actions. And are there any main challenges that you would point out as common for them, for this selection that you mapped out?
There were,
yeah. Well, I mean, if I have to name one, it's gentrification, which is, of course, common in many developed cities, but that seemed to be, this sort of double-bladed this topic that could, that in some initiatives was leveraged for the good, I think. So taking advantage of, the general development of the city, but in others was the enemy to keep at bay. I think it has a lot to do, again, to the general narrative of urban planning and how the administrations are giving values to placemaking, because within the current system, and I think Oslo it's still like a good example compared to other cities, but within the current system, I think developers, just to give it a name, still have too much agency and too much decision-making power in comparison to everyone else. So I think the most inspiring practices were those that were actually taking a stance against this, incredibly powerful enemy with so many powerful ties to power. So that's, I don't know, that for me, one of the main recurring topic of many of the practices we discover. Not all of them, of course.
But if we talk about challenges, there many of them refer to the funding issue, like a lot of practices that are funded by public pots, I would say. The challenge is always how to maintain this practice. What is the legacy? Who takes over at some point when the project is the project, because everything is called project. When these projects are over, who takes over, and how this idea that many of these practices try to do is empower and create this notion of ownership, that the citizen owns what he does and the space created is owned by them. But then if who takes care of this maintenance and the afterlife of these projects? This was always a big topic and a big issue. And also the fact that many of these things start from a personal aspiration, or it's kind of intuitive angriness, like I want to do this and I want to take care of my neighborhood or to contribute, but it's all voluntarily and of course, maybe there is some budget, but at the end of the day, many people said you cannot run a city. It's really great that you can involve people in these practices and these processes of city making, but you cannot run a city on voluntary work. There should be kind of not compensation, but a reward, or not maybe monetary reward, but in a way how these outcomes can be implemented in a way in this city making process, so as a recognition of what is actually happening. Yeah.
So that these initiatives don't disappear as a sort of a first moment, a kickstart moment. That's, yes, I think that we have a question. Yes.
Kan du mute dig? I hi. I have a question, because I think, just first of all, thank you so much for amazing work, and really interesting to hear you talk about it now, kind of having collected all the content that you have. I'm very curious about your thoughts and your ideas of how this project, again talking about project, how this will somehow have a future in Oslo. How would this tool that we created somehow be used, and by whom? Can we, and how do you imagine that the Triennale somehow take this further? Just interested to hear.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
The future of the project somehow. Yeah,
that's a great question, actually. I think this also reflects in the enthusiasm that we've seen in most of the people, all of the people that we've met. We were very overwhelmed by the participation, we have to say. And I think this is also pointing to a need to make a network and to communicate. So I feel everyone involved was very much willing to share and willing to tell us the story, because they struggle to be seen, maybe. And maybe in this idea, in this notion of network and making teaming up, maybe that's where there could be new strength, a new fuel towards the single initiatives. And again, I think it was interesting to go through such a diverse range of projects, because it's obvious how some of them are very well connected and backed up, by say commercial business on one end, backed up by government, whereas others are purely antagonist, and of course they struggle more to emerge. So we think one of the outcomes possibly could be the establishment of a network and communication between the actors for mutual support. And then also on the other hand, that we hope could also become a tool for the citizens. So again, giving visibility to what is happening could maybe prompt someone to will to participate on one end, or also someone to recognize that they could ask for help from some of these practices.
Or inspiration in a way, like the schoolyard project, for example, which was very inspiring, and other schools wanted to learn, because I mean, it's not rocket science, it's just steps that you just need to take, and sometimes it's really scary to confront administrations, and some people don't have the language, some people don't have the literacy in a way with all these documents, and so I think it's also a helping tool to navigate learn how these things are actually possible.
Yeah,
reach out for help, or for
for like consultancy and advice.
Yeah.
That would be an amazing output also on a next step, maybe to create this kind of a city making handbook, how we could collect the tactics, the strategy, and put them in a form that is transmittable to others. but I think it's something that needs to be like very much in depth into the local context, because the jurisdiction it's local, because the cultural context is local, the geography is local, and I think also the different initiatives have different struggles. So just to make an example, if we take the example of the new park, the La Cagata school, there was very much sort of a struggle with the bureaucracy of educational department to try to understand, to try to make them understand that their property could be developed in different ways. Whereas if we take GSF skate park, that's a struggle of zoning and planning and gentrification. If we take the example of the floating saunas, is a struggle of boundaries of responsibility between different authorities. So I think each one of them is super specific, but to try to collect them and give to the public guidelines on how to kickstart their own initiative, how to make their voice heard, that would be really amazing. Yeah.
And I think also for that's a lot of kind of outcomes that's possible of this project, but I think also for the Triennale, it's been extremely kind of interesting to follow your process and as an institution somehow trying to reach a wide audience, being a field that's maybe not used to reaching a wide audience, and we always kind of somehow struggle with inviting or bringing wide audience into our program, even though most issues that we discuss are very much relevant for everyone in the city. So I think also this project somehow can be a way for the Triennale to somehow connect to the more informal things that's going on in the city, and through that also broaden our scope and our network and our way of communicating with the city that we are a part of. So I think that we should try to, I think maybe in post-corona times, it could be very interesting to gather these actors together somehow in Oslo and make them also learn about each other and see that they are quite powerful maybe more powerful together than they are as a single actors in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think somehow like, like throughout history, like there's tools for democracy have been embedded in our constitutions, in our regulations, but they're buried under like a huge layer of bureaucracy, which requires specialists to be uncovered. So that's maybe what we've the most valuable lesson from all the successful stories we met, that people had to really start from scratch and learn how to fight within a system that they were not very comfortable with.
And it's very interesting also to see that some, for example, the Nordic Black Theatre, for example, it's an institution that is already there for 30 years. And they really, in our discussions, we talked about the idea of belonging, basically, like opening up an artistic stage for part of the population that it is actually the future of the country. Like migration is a fact. It's not just a little drop. It's something that is everywhere present, and not including, like not having a stage, a theater stage, for example, that represents this population on the stage. It's very, it doesn't create this idea of belonging in the same society in a way. And they do this for 30 years. And when we told them, did you know that the Oslo Triennale versions ago, they were talking about the topic of Afro belonging? No, we never heard about it. It's somehow we saw a little bit our role as a mediator also in a way, and it was very exciting that we just didn't take information, but we somehow create, as Jan said, we try to create this connection between these practices and make them come to hopefully to a discussion and exchange. We would love to actually have this meeting physically in Oslo and invite everybody around a big table and just talk about all these things.
That's the next step.
We could somehow almost build like a tree structure, like from the, let's say, the local agents that we start to connect with, that we knew from before that had projects in the Triennale, to sort of these more kind of invisible actors that we discovered, or that you guys discovered along the way. Yes, that would be quite interesting to somehow gather them, all these different actors together in a conversation. Well, I think that we are now starting to get close to the end of the conversation and to round up. I was looking to the chat, so it's like if people at home have would like to ask something, now would be the time. If there are any more questions, or else I would like to, before maybe
maybe just to answer one of the questions from Clara, and actually anyone else who have any other question or wants to get in touch, you can just shoot us an email at hello@40-5-degrees.com. I'm writing it on the chat. Oh, what is that? Yeah.
And we have a website, but it's not very. It's actually under construction for many months. But we are working on it, and we would love to share our work also through our website soon. So you can search us when you don't find much, but we are here waiting for.
Okay, so I think it's time to round up the conversation.
We would like to thank you.
Yes.
Just to thank everybody who contributed to this research. All initiatives individually, they were great, and we had a very good fun when we were in Oslo. They showed us things that we would never be able, I think, to experience, and they were all amazing. They're amazing. Everybody's great. Just continue the great work. And
I think everybody should actually get in touch with them.
Yes.
And get to know them firsthand, exactly. Because they're all amazing people.
We just collected this information. We didn't actually do anything.
And and this atlas is actually a really nice tool to somehow identify and get the first approach to all these initiatives. So thank you very much for all your work. And for this project. For us, it was a really, enormous pleasure to work with you, and I think that this is really a content, information, and material that is really valuable and will be very valuable for the Triennale, and to integrate all these, let's say, these voices in these discussions and in the archive of the Triennale as well, for the future conversations, and for as Anna said, to include, let's say, and reach the broader audience, and invite them also to be present and have visibility. So we would like to invite then everybody to explore the Atlas, also actions, and discover these different stories. And we end up this session now, but you can reach 45 Degrees through hello@45degrees.com in the near future. And we are back tomorrow for the second edition of the series of conversations with 3 Fab Creatives, and this time it will be with architectural writer Will Jennings. Okay, have a nice afternoon, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.